Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Groundbreakers. On this podcast, we interview early stage founders and real estate investors to hear their stories that will let them have success in their career and their journey from 0 to 1. I'm joined today by Zach Bagby and Courtney Erickson, the team behind ZB3 Real Estate. Zach founded ZB3 while working full-time in tech, scaling it into a syndication business focused on acquiring and repositioning multifamily properties. Courtney, a longtime investor in ZB3 deals, recently joined as a managing partner, bringing her background in finance, investor relations, and project management to the team. They're both still balancing their careers in tech, Zach at Medley and Courtney at Visa, while growing a real estate business that's creating wealth for investors. I'm excited to dive into their background, how they built ZB3, and how they're scaling their portfolio. So thank you both so much for joining us, Zach and Courtney. Very excited to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so to kick things off, would love to learn more about your backgrounds. I know I gave a bit of a snapshot into what you're doing and some of the highlights, but would love to hear the journey of how you even got into real estate investing and even your winding career path in tech.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm military brat, moved all over the world, played football in college, got really into personal finance. Read Rich Dad Poor Dad, led me down this path to real estate, and got addicted basically. So I knew in college that I would get into real estate. So I saved like a squirrel with my wife. That first year we didn't, we ate very cheap, didn't do any vacations, and then put every penny towards a fourplex, which paid us each month to live in Denver, Colorado. And that's kind of what started our journey.
Awesome. Yeah, I myself didn't always know I wanted to get into real estate. I definitely knew I always wanted to be a financially independent individual. I definitely like to control my own destiny. And so when I did buy my first home and kind of got a feel for how that process worked, I was like, I feel like I can work my way up into owning multiple properties, and that could be a great retirement scheme, and kind of was already in that mindset. However, I think probably most of your audience, and just owning a bunch of single family properties is not necessarily the most lucrative way to invest in real estate. So when I had the opportunity, when I met Zach, and obviously, like he said, he's addicted, and so he talks about it all the time. And so I would hear about it and hear about his passion, and also helped him and his wife, I think, move most of the times that they moved while they were moving up through their real estate and their house hacking journey. When he presented the idea of syndication to myself and other friends of ours, I was like, this is a great opportunity to just kind of get my foot in the door and kind of learn just a different, more passive way to just own bigger, better, more real estate and just diversify my portfolio in that way. And the rest is history. I always used to joke that I'm going to ride his coattails right to the top. And so here we are.
I love that. I feel like getting started in house hacking and single family is a classic way people like dip their toes into real estate investing for the first time. I'm curious, honestly, what led to the jump. Like, you both have full-time jobs, like you're working a lot. Like, what's led to wanting to even get into syndication? Because, single family, my parents are dentists, like they've been just investing in that passively on the side. Syndication, now you're taking on a lot of other people's capital. And, with that comes more responsibility. So very curious, what led to that motivation?
Yeah. Initially it was just a way for me to save even more money, right? That's what house hacking is to reduce my expenses. If you reduce your food, housing, and transportation, you can save more and invest more. But like I said, I got addicted. And as I got addicted, I read more, I listened to more podcasts like this one, learned from people around me, started going to meetups, and from there learned about syndication and wanted to try it on a small scale by myself because I did see that as a more scalable approach. And it worked out really well the first time, so I just got even more addicted and continued to grow from there.
Definitely. And just like I rented out one of my early properties for a while, and being an active landlord is not all it's cracked up to be. I think people think it's fairly simple, and I had a bad experience with another property, like a property management company I tried out, and so I was kind of like, this is for the birds. And after investing, like I said, I was a LP on a limited partner on 4 of Zach's deals before we kind of made this official. And so I've seen the high and the low lows of what can happen with this. And ultimately, any investment is a risk. But I think that when you know who you're investing with, first of all, and then also just having a little bit more control in general is just kind of nice in a world of stocks where you just kind of throw money into an account and I mean, you have voting rights, but what does that really do? So it's just another way to just be more involved, more just able to actually see the numbers, look at the decisions that are being made, and see that output as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Curious, it seems like you guys have known each other for a long time. You've been an investor in multiple of Zach's deals before coming on. You mentioned that you'd helped him actually like go up the ladder of deals that he was investing in and seeing him from the early days. So how do you both meet?
Yeah, we met at Visa initially, which we worked for a few years. I started they were called employee resource groups. It was called the Young Professionals at Visa, where we were focused on career growth. And I would interview executives, and we'd host events and kind of bring people together, networking. And um, I tried to build a board around that, and Courtney was one of the first to volunteer and ended up being like my vice president or whatever. I think she leads the group now,
Yeah.
now that I'm not at Visa. But that's how we met. So we met, weekly talking about young professionals. Then over time, she became really good friends with my wife, and we found that we had similar interests and values in businesses and in life. So
Yep. Same story. I don't have much to add, but met doing the young professionals group. I'm passionate about, making the place that you work for you and just, building positive experiences and just kind of getting people together. I think coworker relationships are just important because it's a lot of your life. And so when I joined Visa, that was one of the first opportunities that came up. And so I jumped on it and joined that board and have made a lot of really good friends from that experience. And then, like Zach said, his wife tagged along to a happy hour and we just hit it off. It was like we were the only 2 people at the table just like giggling and talking. And then I was like, I'm keeping you for sure. So, and that led to game nights. That led to, like I said, we kind of just started to do life side by side. And yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. I feel like some of the best, business relationships start off like, working together, like not even as partners, but just at a like big company. It's very translatable to like starting a company with, a good friend, a family member, or like someone you used to work with. So you get to know each other's work styles really well before jumping into this. Curious, Zach, I know you launched ZB3 before Courtney joined. What was the very first deal for you like, and how many investments have you made until this point?
yeah, so I did 3 house hacks before the first syndication. All of those went really well. I was riding the wave of, everyone was riding from 2018 to 2022. Did the first syndication in 2020. Like I said, I wanted to start small with an amount that I knew I could raise. So we started with the 6plex, which we purchased. It's in Westminster, Colorado, which is kind of north west Denver. It was kind of an off-market deal. Made a relationship with the broker. Kind of got lucky. And got it for $900K, and then got some seller credits. Continued to ride that wave, made some renovations, and ended up selling it for $1.3 million less than 2 years later. So my investors ended up doing really, really well in that deal and with such a quick turnaround. So that's how the first one went. And then since then, we've done 3 more syndications. Funny enough, the most recent one in 2024 is that same property I bought back for $1 million from the person I sold it to, with some seller credits. So it's a pretty cool story there.
Wait, you bought it back for less than you sold it to them for?
Yeah, they took like a $300K hit.
What happened?
Some issue with an HOA situation, and they listed it too high, and it was a timing kind of issue. And broker relationships are key for sure.
Wow, that's incredible. I don't think I've ever had someone on the show say they bought back a property, they exited at a discount more than anything. That's insane. So, I guess going off of that, seems like, you did your last deal last year in a market environment where it was pretty tough for a lot of folks to make things pencil, find, opportunities. What is your current buy box for the types of deals that you invest in ZB3? And, are there certain geographies and markets that you're most excited by and looking at the most?
Yeah, it's interesting question. I feel like it evolves based on the market, but I've been pretty aggressively putting out offers and LOIs the past couple months. I probably analyzed, like literally underwrote like 200 deals and put out 10, 15 offers in the past couple months, Courtney. But I mean, I'm looking for investor returns. They should. My goal is to double everyone's money within 5 years, which I think is you know, kind of conservatively. And if the market takes off and we do better, and absolutely, that's just even better. The markets I'm focusing on are local, so Front Range of Colorado. So that includes up north to Fort Collins, Loveland. We're in Denver, so all the Denver proper, and then surrounding suburbs. And then I'm negotiating on a deal in Colorado Springs right now too. So I like the Front Range of Colorado. We also own a property in Iowa, and then I look in Nebraska a little bit too. So I'm pretty familiar with those markets over the years. I wanted to branch out to the Midwest a little bit. I think those aren't they don't have a ton of competition, but there's still a cash flow to kind of complement the appreciation type equity markets of Colorado. So the goal is to kind of balance across those markets for now.
We also have a few lessons learned from previous properties with age of property, purpose built, different types of red flags that we try to avoid, try not to compromise on too many of those fronts as well. And like Zach said, Front Range of Colorado is a little bit of a tricky market to get to cash flow. So trying to balance that with the Midwest, but it's Denver is where we live. And so definitely have more of a focus where we can go and actually be active. So.
No, that's a good point. I kind of missed that part of the question. So we're focusing on, Class C, Class B properties. So 60s, 70s, 80s built that need some love. So we're value add investors. We look for opportunities in operations and in deferred maintenance. Try to pick up a great deal, turn things around in a year or two, and then see what the market does, and go from there.
Yeah, I feel like one of the benefits of investing in your own backyard is just how well you know the market. And, as an investor, you want to invest with folks that are investing in their local markets because theoretically they should know it better than outside investors. Curious, Courtney, you mentioned like red flags, that you look at with that volume that you've seen over the last 6 months, 200 plus properties and making LOIs on, 10 plus. Curious, what are some of those red flags that you see come up time and time again in like the local Denver market?
The local Denver market, mostly were the red flags that we try to avoid: age of property. We've also had some experience with properties that were not necessarily built to be multifamily, and those just come with their own special issues. And so, like I said, I wouldn't say that we necessarily preclude, but if they have too many of those red flags, like maybe we can compromise on one as long as all the other ones hit. But definitely age of property. There's certain types of deferred maintenance that we definitely know we don't want to touch. Once you get into and actually look at the property, you can kind of tell pretty quickly. And then purpose built is another one of those big ones. Did I miss any, Zach, that were kind of big?
No, I mean, the reason we're not going under contract is a lot due to price. Sellers and buyers are not aligned right now. Financing is difficult. So, yeah, I mean, I'm offering where the numbers make sense and something will stick eventually.
Sorry, I wasn't unmuting. I'll cut this part out, that long gap. I kept clicking and just would not unmute. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. I see a lot of people have been waiting because, to your point, buyers where the price is at and sellers what they're asking for just isn't aligning. So it's been really slow for deals in 2024, which was really surprising to hear. Like you guys did one last year and like found a good opportunity at a big discount. Curious if you guys have looked at any other asset classes. You mentioned, one of your big focuses is like, 70s, 80s build. You're doing value add. But do you look at anything outside multifamily? A lot of folks we've had on the show have been telling me that they're looking now like at debt funds. They're looking at different types of asset classes that they're trying to, offer to their investors. Curious if that's something you've explored, or you're going to stick to value add.
Yeah, not at this time. I think I want to become an expert or the expert in these markets for this asset class. I think that niching down is actually more valuable than spreading out. I know diversification is important, but there's other ways to get that, and maybe we'll look at it at some point. But I think, like we said, um, there aren't many offers going out. We're one of the only people offering on these properties, and even though our offers may seem low, we're the only ones. I'm still getting counters, and if a seller comes to the point where they need to sell, then at least I'm buying. Whereas other people have abandoned multifamily completely. So I think it just makes it less competitive, and there's more opportunities in the space now more than ever.
Absolutely. No, I think that's smart. When all the folks kind of run away because it seems like it's too expensive or doesn't make sense anymore, the people that niche down, like if you find properties that work now, like they're going to be home runs over the next few years, and people are going to know that you're an expert in the space, and it's going to be that much easier to raise capital in the future. So love that perspective of how you're thinking about it. Curious, you mentioned that you've been putting out a lot of LOIs. It's been slow. Like, what is your general take of the overall market in Denver? Like, do you think things are going to be slow the end of this year, next year? I'd say a lot of folks we've had on the show are pretty excited for 2025. Like, do you see numbers shifting in the markets that you're, putting out LOIs in?
No. So what we're seeing is the supply and demand dynamics. There was more supply in the markets I'm looking in than in the past 50 years or something like that. So, vacancies up, rents are down, landlords are struggling, so it's an incredible time to buy. But I think sellers, like we said, are still stuck in the 2022 prices. That's going to have to shift, or if it doesn't shift in time, eventually there's still demand in the market, right? But all of those new deliveries need to be filled, and then the concessions need to come down before there's equilibrium again. So I'm seeing that'll happen, mid to late 2025, at least in the Front Range of Colorado. And then I think what I've been saying is survive 25, and then it'll fix in 26, and then heaven in 27. So that's that's my prediction.
I love that. I like how they all rhyme too, so that's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, there's just a lot of headwinds right now. Part of the reason that sellers aren't coming down is because they're used to the insurance being lower, property taxes being lower, interest rates being lower. And what we're as buyers are seeing is all of those things are way up, with the continued disasters that are happening across the country. That impacts everybody. That impacts everybody's insurance. We have our own special things that we have to deal with in the Front Range of Colorado. A couple of the big players in insurance left, and so it can just be really expensive. And so when you have people's expectations set when the interest rates were in 3s and 4s, and they're like, oh they saw their property value up here, it's gotta regulate itself, and hopefully, like Zach said, if we can find a couple good ones in 2025, by 2026 we should see that level out a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely feels ubiquitous that a lot of sellers are not budging right now in pricing. But as debt comes due and people want to get cash out of their property, I'd say people are finally gonna, wane in and start selling off. So no, it makes a lot of sense, and appreciate you, sharing your perspective on how you're thinking about that. Curious if there's any deals you can talk through. Zach, you've done multiple, and I know Courtney, you've done a few personally through some of the single families where you took away, like maybe something went wrong, took away a big lesson from it, and like you've used that for deals moving forward as like a lesson. I feel like investors a lot of times love to hear some of the things that, mishaps along the way where they can use that and learn from it for their own investments and deals.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a disaster property for sure, and it might beat everyone you've ever had on the show. It'll probably lead to a couple $100,000 loss. So to give you some background, it's an out-of-state property we purchased in 2021. I liked it because it was run down, and I saw a ton of potential, and the cash flow potential was incredible. I knew there was some risk going into it, but I figured I can kind of mitigate those in a few different ways. So there's a range of mistakes that I made, but what ended up happening is a couple months into it, the tenants that I inherited got a little rowdy, and the city ended up shutting down the property completely and gave all of the tenants 24 hours to basically get out. It made local news, and yeah, there's people like calling me for interviews and stuff. I just purchased the property and kind of inherited these problems, but I had to deal with all of them. It was over 100 years old, so it had some issues. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful building, but because of that, once the city shut it down, they went through with a fine-tooth comb and said basically bring everything up to code before you can open it back up. And that led to significant capital improvements that were needed. Basically, everything needed to be replaced: plumbing, electric, all the innards and the outers. So, yeah, so lessons learned from that was I didn't raise enough money. I was planning to handle some of the repairs through cash flow. Don't ever do that. Raise more than you need and have a strong cash cushion. I would avoid a property like that unless I planned up front that this was a possibility, that something would happen and I would have to replace all of the innards and the outers. So cash reserves and planning for the worst to mitigate risk are definitely important. It was my first property out of state, so if I was to invest out of state, I wouldn't work on something so distressed without making those connections. Throughout this process, I've found a lot of great partners, but the initial partners were not that great. And you don't know until you're faced with challenges with those people, right? So it's easier to either start small or start simple if you are going into a new market, so that you can start to build those relationships and see what they're really made of. I think those are kind of the main takeaways. Learned a lot about like managing contractors and project management and stuff through that as well. But I'd say those are the main takeaways for sure.
Do you have a rule of thumb when it comes to capital reserves for an older deal? And do you have like, you mentioned this property is over 100 years old. Like that's incredibly ambitious to take over. Curious if now what's your cutoff? You're like nothing, past 50 years I'm going to touch.
Yeah, I mean, anything, unless like plumbing or electrical has been replaced, I really won't look at anything older than like 1960, 1950 for sure. So that's kind of the cutoff for me at this point.
Yeah, and you kind of heard some of those red flags come up that I alluded to earlier that popped up during that deal, age of property. I think that one, I mean, it's a 100-year-old building, so it probably wasn't purpose built. And there was a third one I was going to mention. And I don't, that one is mostly studios, which actually has worked out. It's filled quite nicely since we repaired it and got it all up to code and things like that, but something that's all studios or mostly studios is also one of those. If it's the only red flag, like maybe we can make those numbers work, but if it's a red flag amongst age, price, all of those other things, it's something that we'll pass on. So
Yep, and to go back to your reserves question, I like 3 to 6 months of reserves for a property like this. I'd definitely be in like the 6 months of expenses. So that's all expenses, including vacancy. So I'd project that out 3 to 6 months and then make sure that we have that at all times.
Got it. No, appreciate it. And seems like there was a lot of wisdom that was attained from going through that, especially as your first deal out of state. Sounds like a nightmare, but you're on the other side of it and got a lot of learnings from it. And now the red flags are there that Courtney looks out for. She's doing her due diligence. So, something I want to touch on is, seems like you guys are looking at a lot of deals in a pretty short period of time while still balancing full-time jobs. Like, how does that work from a time balance perspective? I think a lot of folks we've had on the show also have W-2 jobs. And so they've had to share with us like how they manage their time. What does that look like for you both? And do you see a future in which maybe you're doing syndication or real estate investing full time?
For me, I am most productive from the hours of like 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. So once my kids go down for bed, I have two young boys, one's 2 and one's 6 months. So um, that's when I get my work done. And, I'll respond to brokers if I can in between meetings or, take a half day and go look at a property or something. But, that's a pretty good amount of time every night to get a lot of work done. And that's what's worked for me.
For me, my time block is a little earlier. I'm definitely not that much of a night owl. I would say like after dinner until like 10 to 11. If I get going on things, that's if I can just get started. I think that's the biggest thing, is I think that with things like starting your own business, sometimes the tasks or the to-dos, or sometimes you don't even have to-dos. I think that's one of the struggles with having your own business, is you're the one who makes the to-dos. Like, you're in charge of figuring out what to do next. And so it can be a little bit overwhelming, but once you kind of just get started and start on something, the tasks kind of just flow into each other after that point. So for me, the biggest thing is getting started. And I think also it's just taking an honest look at your life. For me, when Zach asked me if I wanted to join this business, for I don't have kids. My boyfriend has kids, and so I'm very involved with them, but they're older, so much more independent. And I was looking at, even just looking at your screen time, for example. If you're doing 5 hours a day of screen time, maybe that's something that you can evaluate. I think it's just more about priorities and just taking a real stock of like where you're actually putting your time. Is it in front of a small screen, a big screen? Is it, like, how do you want to best utilize your time to create more freedom in the future? So
Absolutely. No, appreciate you, sharing both how you're balancing that, like while having full-time jobs. I'm with you. Before starting Homebase, I used to work outside of Google hours, like at night, probably for 2 years on different things before actually going full time. So definitely tough. And you get used to giving yourself your own agenda of like what you need to get done, because, no one else is going to be pushing you except for yourself.
yeah,
Uh,
and I would say, Zach, you can speak to this as well, is that the goal is to eventually have this be something that can sustain one or both of us. We're open to it working out in either way or any way. And maybe this is something that we do on the side for much longer, but we're definitely open to that and we've been talking to people that are kind of ahead of us in that journey on what that could look like. We both have significant others, so, things even like health insurance, like where's that coming from and what are we doing with that? And so it's definitely on the table. But yeah, I would say it's on the table.
Yeah, I mean, that would be definitely an option in the future. I think having our nice jobs today actually give us an advantage, right? There's syndicators that are desperate because they need to put food on the table, so they need that acquisition fee, or they need to sell a property when they shouldn't sell. We can hold strong and wait for the best deal and wait for the right time to sell, because we don't need that money to live, at least for now, right? So I think that gives us an advantage.
Yeah, and our day jobs, both in technically tech, Visa's more financial services, and I always say it's a financial services wearing like a technology trench coat. Like in the bones, it's really financial services, but they try to be tech. But that enables us to also invest in our deals and kind of, build this business with that capital that we earn from our W-2s.
Yeah, definitely competitive advantage there. People that do it full time don't always have liquid capital to put into their deals. And then LPs are sometimes like, if you're not in it, why should I get in this sort of thing? So, no, that makes so much sense. And honestly leads to the next question of, I've seen some of you guys post on LinkedIn. Seems like you have pretty audacious plans for 2025. Seems like 2026 is going to be an even better year, and 2027 7. So curious, what does the rest of this year or next year look like for you guys? Like, aspirationally, how many deals are you trying to get done? And, if everything comes true, where are you guys at the end of the year?
Yeah, so this year you'd like to buy 2 to 3 deals and break 5 million in acquisitions. That would be a big year for us. And then next year push towards 7-8 million and just kind of had this steady growth year over year. And not try to time the market, but invest, continue to grow our network, grow our investor base, grow our partners across different avenues, and get the word out there, right? It's been a silent business that I've done on the side from 9 to 1 and not told anyone about for long enough. And that's one of the reasons I brought Courtney is to yell it from the rooftops and one of the reasons we're doing this podcast as well is, we're here and we're going to do amazing things. So here's an opportunity for you if you're interested. You're welcome to join us on this adventure.
Yeah, and Zach is definitely more of the entrepreneurial spirit. I lack that a little bit. I anytime someone tells me like I want to do this, I'm like, okay, how? Break it down step by step. What's the next? Like, what do you have to do next to get there? And so definitely, looking at those big goals, we've together broken those down into KPIs, into key performance indicators, like how many deals does Zach have to underwrite? How many people do we have to have following us on social media platforms? How many people do we need to be reaching out to? And, it starts big and you get down to where you need to be with the investor or the deal. And so it's been a numbers game and we're trying to do everything we can to prepare for when those deals do come. I think like Zach said, with us having full-time jobs and stuff, we're able to be a little bit patient. So maybe that 5 million might come in Q4, but definitely excited to be celebrating some of those goals achieved at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And love that you guys are trying to get the word out and intentionally trying to grow outside of doing it silently on the side that a lot of people do as they're getting started. Who would you say is your ideal investor or person that comes in on these deals? I imagine, given your full-time roles in tech and in financial services / tech, I'm sure people in those type of jobs would probably resonate with you as fund managers, but also investors. So curious if you guys have an archetype of investor.
Yeah, our investor archetype is a professional. Most of our investors are in the tech world just because that's where our network is. So there's a lot of engineers, but also people that own their own businesses or have their master's degree, whatever it might be. So those are the people we're talking to and reaching out to and letting them know about what we're about. They're excited about real estate. They're interested, but they're also nervous and afraid. So a lot of what we do is educate. And as we educate, they'll feel more comfortable with the process and realize the advantages of the syndication format, where you can be a passive investor and not have to deal with toilets in the middle of the night and kind of tag along with someone that has experience and partners that can help, have a higher chance of success. And we can, it's not always accurate, but we can kind of predict how we can improve a property and budget for things. And it's harder to do that in a traditional business, right? So it's a lot of education of those, tech individuals or professionals.
Yeah, I would say some other aspects is I think that real estate, especially over that boom period, 2020 to 2023, I think everybody was like, man, if I could, I would just buy something, fix it up, sell it. It was kind of I feel like a lot of younger people had that itch to I feel like I could do that. But when push comes to shove, a syndication is the perfect way to kind of do that without having to do it. So someone who's had real estate in the back of their minds, but maybe just doesn't have the time or the resources or the know-how to kind of pull that trigger, partnering with a general partner that's done that before, like Zach and I, is a great opportunity. Something else that's unique about us is that we can take sophisticated investors, so you don't have to have a certain level of income or net worth in order to invest with us. It just requires us to build a little bit of relationship first. And so we're able to take kind of those middle people that might not be worth $1 million yet, might not be hitting that 200, 300K a year, but they have money to invest. And also another unique thing that I'm excited about is using a self-directed IRA that's another great way to invest in either syndications or just get a little bit more creative with your investments. You don't have to do the traditional stocks, bonds. And I think also just in today's climate, sometimes there's some ethical questions about investing with certain companies with stocks and things like that. If you're really getting into the nitty gritty of who you're making money off of, that can be a concern. That's a concern I've heard from potential investors as well. And with Zach and I, we're obviously trying to have investor returns, but we're trying to create healthy, like great communities for the people that we actually do that rent from our buildings as well. And it's not just about the investor, it's also about making sure that we're creating safe, healthy, and just happy living environments as well. So those are some other investor, if they're interested in those things, would be ideal.
Yeah, no, investor education and, where the funds are actually being put to use for, I think are big pieces that are top of mind for a lot of folks in like tech and financial services space. I know back when I was at Google, a lot of there was also an employee resource group where people would talk about real estate investing. A lot of people were new to it, didn't really know much about it, but really wanted to get educated. And a lot of those people did have disposable income to invest. So for anyone listening in tech and wants to reach out to someone like Zach or Courtney, you should absolutely reach out, and I'll share a lot of their information in the show notes of this episode. But really want to end it off with one last question for both of you. You've had quite the career in both tech, financial services for you, Courtney, and real estate investing, both in the syndication side, but also personally through single families and house hacking. Like, any advice you give people early on in their career, either on like real estate focused or more like tech focused as they're going up the ladder?
So if we start with real estate, there's a couple different paths. If you want to get down and dirty and deal with all the problems and learn everything from the ground up, there's no better advice than house hacking. I think that's where you should start and see if this is something you really want to do, because you will learn from the heart of the school of hard knocks. You will deal with tenant issues, you'll deal with repairs, you'll deal with contractors, and it's a pain, but it's the best way to learn on like a small scale. So I would recommend that to anyone. And then if you want to stay on the passive side, something like syndication, REIT, whatever, education is the most important way, and that's a way to kind of educate yourself without having to get your hands dirty. From a tech perspective, I think that you need to, or any career, right? You need to find a way to stand out. You need to figure out what I did, at least, is figure out the areas in your organization that are not doing very well or could be improved, and then bring solutions to those problems and drive those solutions to fruition. Don't wait for your manager to suggest something. Be a driver, not a passenger, and make a name for yourself. Those are the types of people that move up quickly and get more opportunities, are the ones that make their own opportunities. So that's my advice there.
My advice, I give this advice to interns at Visa all the time, is just to be truly honest with yourself about what you want out of life. I see a lot of interns or younger people, they want to pull the lever. I want to work full time from home. I want to make 6 figures. I want good work-life balance, and I want to do something that I love. And realistically, you can pull 2, maybe 3 of those levers. If you want good work-life balance, you might have to sacrifice a 6-figure salary out of college. If you want, good benefits, and you have to be able to be honest with yourself about what you want. Maybe you find a unicorn job, and I love that for you. If you can pull all of those levers, stay there forever. That's amazing. But I think ultimately being honest with yourself about what you want out of life, and then breaking it all the way back down to what do I need to do today to make that happen, and then track yourself and keep yourself accountable to those things. If you want to invest in real estate, start putting money aside. If you want to retire when you're 55, pull up your 401k and figure out what you need to be putting into that, what you can put into a Roth, what you can put into, if you have a certain goal or a certain idea of life, if you want to travel, you have to go. Like you have to save that money, and then you have to go and you have to book the ticket, and actually and doing those things in in ways that are sustainable. So starting, small, putting those $50 aside, kind of like Zach was talking about, him and Britt like lived like squirreling away money. They sacrificed other things to have one thing. And so understanding if you want this out of life, you have to sacrifice this, and just really chasing after it is usually the advice that I give. Career, relationships, I think you can apply it to a lot of different things. Being really realistic about what you want and realizing you can't necessarily have it all, and you have to say no to some things to say yes to other things. And so I think that's usually my little plug for career, anything.
Wow, that's deep. I love that. I like telling interns. I feel like I've heard Gen Z is not the most hardworking, and so great advice for folks that are starting off early and getting into it. So thank you both so much for coming on Groundbreakers, sharing your story, and just being so transparent in the types of deals that you're investing in, how you're thinking about the market and things moving forward. If there's anyone interested in learning more about either of you or ZB3 Real Estate, where could they go to find you?
Yeah, so for me, I'm especially active on LinkedIn. So I'm looking on LinkedIn every day. That's a great way. We also have a website, zb3re.com or zb3realestate.com. You learn more about us there.
There's a link on our website as well to schedule time with us. I think the best way to kind of start getting involved if you're truly interested is just if you're local to the Denver area, grab a cup of coffee, grab a drink, and kind of just sit down and chat. If you're not, you can still book time on either of our calendars through our website. Like Zach said, he's active on LinkedIn. I'm also active on LinkedIn. You can send us a message there. But yeah, I think the motto that we have at ZB3 is we love to talk about real estate. We're going to be talking about it whether anyone's listening or not. So you might as well, if you want to talk about it, find us. We'll talk about it with you.
Hey, I'll be there. That sounds amazing. Well, thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Groundbreakers. We drop episodes every week, and we will continue to have awesome guests like Zach and Courtney share their stories. Thank you both again so much for coming on.